So as they've said, my name is Pamela Collins. I'm a scientist at the Moore Center for Science at Conservation International, and I will be sharing with you some work today that we have done on mapping ecosystem services. So fabulous, great. Okay, so what I will do with this brief presentation is give a very short summary of what you need to know when working with ecosystem service data, two different types of data sets that we have been working with at Conservation International, some key questions that are worth asking as you think about how to use these kinds of data, and then I'll make some space for Peter to speak as well. So first, as a general overview, it's important to know a few things about ecosystem services, that there are a few broad categories that tend to apply to most types of services: regulating, provisioning, or cultural. So regulating as processes, provisioning as materials, and cultural as immaterial things. Within these three general categories, there are many, many different subcategories, and there are many different frameworks that have been created by different organizations. Some are computer models, some are conceptual frameworks, and there are many different frameworks because needs vary by region, time scale, and ecological or social context. So there's no one master list of, these are the ecosystem services that you need to work with. So it takes a little more thinking and planning to figure out what the right approach is for a given context. The other thing that's important to note is that ecosystem services are broken out into 3 steps in a process. The first step is measuring physically what the ecosystem is generating or regulating. The second is making some quantitative estimate of how those physical outputs of the system then allocate to people, how people benefit. And you can stop there, or you could then also do some additional calculations, some additional estimates on economic value. But just note, at each step in that process, there is uncertainty and there are assumptions that get made. So when working with ecosystem services as a concept, these are some things to keep in mind. Now, at Conservation International, we have 2 projects going on. One project is bringing together different individual ecosystem service categories that have been mapped or modeled by a wide variety of different data providers. You can see the list at the bottom of this page of the categories that we are working with in this project. Now remember, there are many more categories out there in different frameworks, but these were what we were able to get access to for global gridded data. So data availability is something I'll come back to. The map that you see on your screen is the result of combining the red services at the bottom of the list. Now it's very important to note the final map when the project is complete will include all of the services, and the combination approach is under development as well. So the map on your screen is more sort of an illustration of how the work may look than an actual final product. So just, remember this is what we are aiming for, but this is not the final map. And this work is being done in consortium with the Natural Capital Project at Stanford University. Now there's a second project which is related to specifically Uganda and uses the costing nature model that Chavi mentioned in the previous presentation. This project was completed in 2019 and has a report that I've shared with Annie or Scott, so that should be accessible for sharing around. And this project asked, using the suite of ecosystem services that are represented in the costing nature model, how can we map where are the most high performing areas around the country for different services and for combined services? So some of the results you can see on your screen here. These results were made, as Chavi pointed out, only with the global data. The next step in the analysis would be to then compare them against information that Uganda has nationally. So the water map on the bottom right, for example, we would definitely want to evaluate that against the water map data that was mentioned in the comment, and then have an iterative approach to improving the analyses. Finally, as I wrap up, so there are some important things to keep in mind when you're trying to decide, what ecosystem service, conceptual framework, or quantitative model do I use when I'm doing analyses for my country. Broadly, you need to think about scope, spatial and temporal resolution, scale, and the categories that you need. You also want to think about the physical processes, what Chavi called potential, versus how many people could be affected, what Chavi called realized, or if you want cost information. And then in terms of data formatting, do you want gridded data, summary statistics? Can you do what you need to do with existing data, or do you need to collect new data?